Hello and welcome to another exciting screencast from the offices of General Ledjah. This time we're going to be walking through the new payroll workbook for 2015. At the end of this we should be able to fill out this sheet to determine the appropriate paychecks for your employees as well as the source deduction payments that you're going to have to make. For those of you who've used this workbook before, you'll notice it looks very similar, but there are a few important differences this year. So I'm going to cover the basics of the sheet as well as pointing out the differences from previous versions. So first we're going to take a look at the source deductions page. We navigate between pages by clicking on the tabs at the bottom. So we'll start here at the source deductions page. This year, as opposed to previous versions of this sheet, you do not have to fill in anything on this sheet. It will fill in automatically, other than you need to fill in your filing frequency. So if you do your source deduction remittance quarterly or monthly, you need to fill it in these two pink boxes here for both federal filing and provincial filing. And you also need to fill in your CSST rate over here in the blue box. If you file annually, we'll just be using the top gray line here, so you can leave the Q's in here. So in order to see how this sheet is going to work, we're going to have a look first at the employee sheets. So you can see when you get the sheet that along the bottom here are a number of tabs. These ones labeled A through Z are your employee sheets. Each one of these sheets is going to represent one employee, and you're going to fill out something on each of these sheets every pay period. So we can rename them according to our employees by double clicking. So I own a company and I have two employees. Their names are Mary and James. So on Mary's sheet at the beginning of the year, I'm going to fill out her name here, her address, and her SIN number. And this is just so that we have all this information in one place when it comes time to making T4s at the end of the year. The other thing you'll see are these yellow boxes at the top of the sheet asking if the employee is an owner and if they own 40% or more. This is just because owner salaries are not subject to CSST deductions, and if you own 40% or more, you don't have to pay into EI, so you can put a Y in these boxes if that's relevant for a particular employee or not. We're going to leave those blank for now. So generally, this part that I'm highlighting is going to represent something like a pay stub for each employee. You're going to fill out one of these sections on each of your employee sheets for every pay period. So let's fill one out. I'm going to fill in here the dates that were covered in this pay period. That was my employee. She worked 65 hours at $14 an hour. She earned $125 in tips. But if she did not, if your employees do not earn tips, you can leave that box blank. What we're left with here is her taxable pay. This is the amount of taxes that will be deducted and the other deductions that will be deducted from her paycheck, and this is the employer portion of source deductions, leaving a final check amount of $675.60. So that's going to be your check to Mary. Let's say it's check 127, and this box is very important. January 4th was the last day of my payday. That was my pay period. That was a Sunday. Thursday is my payday, so I'm going to put here the date of my Thursday payday. This date is crucial. Your source deduction payments are dependent on the date on the paycheck, not necessarily the dates worked. So even though some of these days landed in 2014, this goes on the January source deduction remittance because the check was written in January. If this date is filled in incorrectly, that could result in penalties at the end of the year, which we would like to avoid. So please fill in this date properly. If your employees work all the time, the dates will actually fill in automatically throughout the rest of the pay periods. But if they work sporadically, you're going to have to update this paid on date every time you fill in a paycheck. Just a side note about tips. If your employees earn commissions, or if you collect tips on behalf of your employees and they are to be included on the paycheck, then you need to delete the less tips granted box, and that is actually the amount that you will write your check for. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in my other employee, and then we'll have a look at the source deductions page. So now you can see I've done the same thing on the James page. He worked 62 hours at $14 an hour. His taxable pay was $988. These are his deductions. These are the employer portion of the deductions. And he's got a check for $771.50, which I wrote on check number 128. And I paid again on the 8th of January 2015. So let's go have a look at the source deductions page, and we can see that we've started to fill in some of the this table here. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in a bunch of pay stubs to get me through the end of the first quarter, and we'll check back in a second. Now we can see here that I have filled in a series of paychecks for Mary that are taking me through the end of the first quarter. I've done the same thing for James, and we can go have a look at the source deductions page. So there are a couple of things to notice here. One, my CSST column is blank because I forgot to put in my CSST rate. So I'm going to put it in, and the numbers will appear as I wanted them to. And so there's, what else can we see? Well, the March row has been filled in, and there are also some numbers in the June row, and this gray row up here is also filled in. So what we've got is I have actually filled in one pay stub for quarter 2, and it has already gone in towards the June remittance, but here in the March row are my complete remittance numbers for the first quarter, which is due, the remittance is due on April 15th. So I'm going to fill in these numbers in all of these boxes. This row is complete only once I have filled in the pay stub representing the last check written in Q1. And then subsequent paychecks will go into the Q2 row, and so on and so forth for the rest of the year. If I had been filing monthly, both federally and provincially, the remittance for January numbers would be found in this row, and February in this row, and so on. So let's put this back to quarterly, and so now, even though I have entered my next paycheck, the one that was written in April, you can actually see that here. This check was cashed on or written for April. It hasn't changed what I owe for my payment in for the first quarter. And so I'm going to take on my federal remittance form, I'm going to take the full total federal owing with the total payroll, and then these boxes correspond to the boxes that you would have to fill out to do your Revenue Quebec provincial DAS form. Remember that your remittance payments are always due on the 15th of the following month after the end of the reporting period. So if you file quarterly, your Q1 payment is due April 15th. Now, just before we finish, a couple of little notes about this sheet. Number one, always make sure that this date is correct, that this is the date on the check. Number two, if you have any notes to write, if you paid out vacation pay, if you paid a bonus and you need to do a little bit of math on the side here, do it over here rather than in here, because there are calculations happening in this zone and you could throw off the deduction calculations. If you need to add an employee, if there is a new hire, you can just create their sheet with one of the blank ones, rename it, and carry on like usual. Just make sure that you get their first pay period dated properly with the date of the check that they were given on their first pay period. If employees leave, do not delete their sheets, because it's still important to have a record of what the source deductions were. But if you want to get it out of the way, you can move it around and stick it to the end where you don't have to look at it anymore. The deductions that we have calculated are based on 26 pay periods for a biweekly pay. And so if you are going to pay out vacation pay or a bonus or things of that nature, it's best if you can add them to an existing payroll rather than create an extra one. You may run out of these pay stubs, or you may end up throwing off the calculations and making the wrong deductions for the employee. And finally, the first two sheets in the workbook give some of the instructions that we've talked about in this screencast, a little bit of a refresher in case you forget something. Those are always available to you, and you also can contact us by email if need be, or if something is going wrong. Hope this was helpful, and this is the end of the screencast. Good luck.